Section 21, telemarketing, the last section in the code, I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. And one of the largest sections, and one of the areas where we've had a hell of a lot of issues over the years, but I'm glad to say now we don't get as many complaints to the Commission as we used to. This section mainly looks at telemarketing in terms of outbound rather than inbound, as that area is more regulated. But it does make reference to inbound requirements as well. As I said, this area is very large, so please have a look through if you are a contact centre or providing telemarketing calls. I've just picked out the main points here for you to digest. Firstly being, if you are using premium rate services, you must comply with the Phone Pay Plus code of practice. This is the regulator in here, and that is the company who distributes the numbers. They're formerly known as ICSTIS, as some of you might be aware. There is an area here, a subcategory called information to be provided on a call. This is important, makes you a requirement to volunteer the name of the advertiser at the beginning of the call. And also members must disclose their own name if requested during any time in the conversation. So volunteer the advertisers, and if you are requested, or if the agent is requested during the call, must also disclose their name. The purpose of the call must be made clear at the start, and the agent obviously shouldn't diverge from that purpose during the call. Got a point here, no pinging. What's pinging? Pinging is, I'm sure some of you will be aware, automatically dialing a series of random numbers to test whether those numbers are indeed live, and then making further use of that and producing lists and so forth. This is obviously very inconvenient to the consumers, but more importantly it can add to the network congestion, and in a worst case scenario actually overload a local exchange if pinging is taking place on a large scale. So this is not allowed by Ofcom, and as such is outlawed in our code as well. Mention here TPS, CTPS, the Telephone Preference Service and the Corporate Telephone Preference Service. This is a statutory obligation for companies to screen against these files when they have bought in cold data. That will be dealt with in more detail in the preference service talk by Scott, so I won't go into too much detail there, but again that's contained within this section and the requirement to screen list against those files. If you are using automated equipment, that is any dialers that could be termed predictive, progressive, power dialers, auto dialers or adaptive dialers, so making calls without the need for human intervention, then please go and see sections 21.22 to 21.31. We had a big issue in the industry a few years back with these certain companies abusing these and ratcheting up the rate at which these calls were being churned out so high that there were more calls than there were agents to take. Therefore, calls were being dropped, and it was causing consumers to pick up the phone, and a silent call was generated. There was nobody on the other end of the line, and this was causing a lot of fear and distress amongst consumers, people picking up the phone thinking that it was a ex-husband or a burglar trying to case the house, and it caused a lot of fear and alarm, and as a result of that Ofcom brought in a whole raft of regulations to curb the misuse, and these are outlined within this section of the code. So if you are using auto dialer equipment, please do look at that, because there are quite a number of things that you would need to do if you are using those devices. Just beyond that in the code, there is a requirement, regardless of whether you're using automated equipment, dialing equipment or not, to actually provide caller line identification, CLI. We do actually go further than Ofcom in the requirement here that it applies whatever means that you're using to make telephone calls, and this is providing a callback line for somebody who misses the call. If it's on a mobile, the number would be presented on screen. If it's not, if it's just on a normal landline, as long as somebody's able to dial 1471 and get the number and call back, then that meets the requirement. If they do call back on the line provided, a message must be played to state who the company is and the opportunity to decline further calls. I think most members now are realising that this is a requirement and making the necessary steps to implement this. If you haven't already, please do so. Some people think that it takes a lot of work and technical expertise to implement this, whereas often it doesn't. It just requires a call to your local, to your telecommunications provider, and they can set you up with this system. Again, if you do have any queries on this, please give a member of the compliance or legal team a call. We've got in here reasonable hours. This is a question we get asked a hell of a lot. What are the reasonable hours for calling? Just exactly as it is with text messages, for example, we say the reasonable hours are between 8 AM and 9 PM on weekdays and 9 AM and 9 PM on weekends. The last point here is a point that actually is an area of the section which has actually been changed, and this is the call monitoring area, an area governed by the RIPA Act 2000, which is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers. And this is the last point, the last area of this section and of the code indeed, and it sets out the ways that you can record calls. There's two different options. The first option is fairly simple. You gather the consent of the person making or receiving the call. If you've got the consent, then that's fine. But of course you can also do this without the person making or receiving the call having provided explicit consent, for the reasons of quality control, training purposes, to prevent or detect a crime, or to ensure that the telephone system is operating effectively. For example, businesses monitoring calls to see if they are business or personal calls. If the recording includes details of a financial transaction, then the systems and the operation that you've got set up there, this should abide by the PCI DSS standard. This is a standard which I referred to in another section of the code, on the online and also on the fulfillment section, I believe. And this is a standard which has been put in place for companies who are taking payment cards, debit, credit cards over the phone or via online. Section 21.46 talks about this requirement and also provides a URL to the actual organisation, the PCI DSS organisation, to get further information.